I heard you say in a recent interview that our foreign policy is diplomacy free. Can you elaborate on what you mean by that and when it became diplomacy free?
Yeah, diplomacy is the art of persuading foreigners to do things your way. And how do you do that? You persuade them to accept that your definition of their interests is correct and that it would serve their interests to do what you want them to do. That's diplomacy. It has been replaced with a military message sending system. So we bomb the Houthis, the de facto government in Yemen, in the name of sending them a message. We send a message to Hezbollah in the same manner. We send a message to the various resistance groups scattered around the Middle East and to their Iranian backers in the same way. It's a lot cheaper and more effective to sit down and talk to someone than to pull a gun on them and shoot them. But that's what we seem to have substituted for normal course of diplomatic interaction.
How would you describe what happens between, for instance, Israel and the United States? Is that even diplomacy or is that not even diplomacy? Because it doesn't seem like they're using any leverage. Is that just, I don't even know what the word would be that I could say.
Israel is a client state of the United States. What that means is it derives benefits from the United States. Those benefits are very considerable and they're on full display during this genocidal war. Israel could not conduct this war without the constant emergency resupply of American weapons. It could not conduct it without American protection in the United Nations. So it's very clear what Israel gets out of this relationship, which is not grounded in any foreign policy consideration. It is grounded entirely in domestic politics, fear of the Israel lobby, campaign donations, and domestic political calculations that it is expedient to support Israel. I don't know how many of the people who vociferously support Israel in Congress are really sincere. I do know that they are very much aware of the consequences of not supporting Israel. So this is the nature of the relationship. Is it diplomatic? No. If you doubt that, remember the moment when Prime Minister Netanyahu was invited by the Republicans to come and address the Congress against the wishes of the president, and did so, receiving multiple kowtows and vociferous applause for basically disagreeing with the executive branch of the U.S. government. So this is a formidable machine that is domestic in nature. Nobody can really point to strategic advantages from the Israel relationship. Israel does do a lot of useful military research under Pentagon contracts, but there's no reason in principle those couldn't be done in New Jersey. Israel gets us into wars in the Middle East, or gets us into confrontations, as it did during the Cold War on numerous occasions, risking nuclear exchanges and so forth. So I think this is the argument that somehow, the basic argument for supporting Israel has been, first, we share values. Well, Israel is demonstrating the values of the Ku Klux Klan, and I don't share those values. And second, basically what's going on in Gaza is a mass lynching. It's totally extrajudicial, illegal, and brutal, and utterly inhumane. And the second reason is supposedly that Israel is a strategic asset. But I have never heard anyone describe what it does for us other than get us in trouble. So I think this is a moment in which the Israelis have made a huge mistake because, the question they used to pose was, does Israel have a right to exist? Which is a rather strange question because it does exist. I don't know of other countries that run around asking whether they have a right to exist. But I think that question is being replaced now in much of the world by, does Israel deserve to exist? Can the world really maintain normal relations with a country that behaves in utter disregard of international law and in a completely inhumane fashion? And I suspect the answer is not going to be anything that Israel welcomes, or us, because we are entirely complicit in this. And we are inadvertently destroying the framework for global influence, primacy, that we established during the Cold War and in the immediate aftermath of it. The UN is being discredited completely. And we have seen in other contexts where international institutions have been destroyed by our actions or inactions, that others are now willing to step forward and develop ad hoc arrangements or workarounds or alternative institutions. Look at the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. Look at the BRICS. Look at the Belt and Road Initiative centering on China. Look at the workarounds to the World Trade Organization dispute resolution mechanisms that are being developed on a bilateral basis. We are seeing the collapse of the order that we claim to be trying to preserve, and it's collapsing largely because of our own actions or acts of omission.
On the point about Israel's right to exist, Noam Chomsky has said that this issue really only arose in the 1970s after the Palestinian leadership and Arab states began calling for a Palestinian state. So the aim of calling on them to recognize Israel's so-called right to exist was to get them to accept a condition that would be impossible, because they were being asked basically not only to recognize Israel's existence, but also to recognize Israel's right to exist on stolen Palestinian land, which of course no Palestinian could ever accept. So the whole rhetoric was designed to undermine any call for a Palestinian state by imposing a condition that Palestinians could never accept.
No, I agree with you. The basic premise is a zero-sum game for control of Palestine. If Israel has a right to exist, by its own definition, since it has no borders, it constantly expands. If it has the right to exist, that implies it has the right to everything from the river to the sea, which is indeed in the Likud Charter. So I think this is a classic instance of settler colonialism. And, the question, if you ask, well, who gave Israel the right to exist? It does seem to have been British imperialism, colonial powers. And to the extent that this had international sanction by the United Nations, which at the time was not composed of newly independent, previously colonized countries, it was a partition which greatly favored Jewish settlement, but which the Israelis overturned with a war. They declared independence and drove the population out. So what is the basis for the right to exist? And that's why I think this is very shaky. And people will ask, given Israeli behavior, does it deserve to exist? And I think the answer may be unpleasant.